Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us. If you are new here, we take about 30 minutes and we usually go over a topic, or in tonight's case, we have a special guest who's going to present to us, and then we will always have time for questions. So as he's talking, if some questions come up, we'll ask that you please type it in the chat, and then I will be asking those questions to Tim just to streamline this. Guys, if you remember, we had Allison, Parker, Lauren talking about their experience at the swimming camp, and it was with Tim Floyd, and Tim Floyd is our special guest tonight. While we could go on and on about swimming, which Tim, we need to have you back for swimming because we do follow a lot of Tim's protocols. Tonight, we're going to talk about the mental side, and as it's brought to our attention the last couple of weeks, and you guys should all know that is everything. And so I'm not going to take much time. I've kind of explained to a lot of you already his impact in my life, his impact in our programming. So I'm just going to let Tim take it away. So welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Natasha, and thanks for having me on tonight and being able to talk to everybody. I think the first thing, I'll just give kind of a brief rundown of me, and then we'll kind of jump right into it. So my name is Tim Floyd. I have been coaching swimming now for 30 years. I've been working with triathletes exclusively for 13. I swam competitively through kind of high school and college. I did my first triathlon at 15. So that would have been 1988. And it was actually the last Ironman qualifier for the season, but it was kind of a weird event. It was a weird distance, but that was kind of triathlon back then. Yeah, so that's kind of me and how I got here. What we're going to talk about tonight is some of how my ideas around coaching have changed, particularly over the last kind of 40 years. So, I started competing in swimming when I was 7. Back then it was, if a little bit of swimming is good, more is better. And most of the coaching, and this was kind of endurance sports in general, was that the primary thing that you were training was VO2 max. That was the number that everyone wanted to target, everyone wanted to increase. It was all about, in swimming, it was an aerobic base and aerobic capacity. That's what you were trying to build, and that's what all the yardage was building up. Over the last, particularly kind of the last 15 to 20 years, I started to kind of question a lot of that and say, is that really the case? Is that what we are really training? And when you really start to get into it, it doesn't start to look like that. So if you think of it this way, think of racing a triathlon or racing faster and more efficiently in a triathlon as a skill. Certainly one of the components of that skill is that aerobic capacity increases, anaerobic capacity increases, W prime, mitochondrial density, all of the physiological components of racing a triathlon faster and more efficiently, those all increase if you're training correctly and doing it right. However, that's not the entirety of the skill. And at the end of the day, what it looks like you're actually training is the brain. And you're training the brain and the nervous system the skill of how to race a triathlon faster and more efficiently. And if you look at it this way, the byproduct of that skill development is you increase aerobic capacity, anaerobic capacity. And when you start to look at it that way, it subtly kind of changes all of the training. Some ways it's subtle and some ways it's not so subtle. But this is one of the things kind of that we worked on at the camp a lot, that I just put on for the last few weeks. And I think, Allison was at the clinic the other day. One of the things that we talked about was not using a watch during swimming. to use the pace clock. And it's for this reason. If you're looking at trying to be present, if you're trying to be engaged with the workout, if you're looking to try and be focused, and ultimately what we're really talking about here is your attention and where you focus it and how long you can focus it on a particular skill development. If you let the watch, your smartwatch, do the mental work for you, you're taking out an opportunity, and a really important opportunity, to improve the overall. Because that skill of learning how to focus, learning how to hold your attention in one area, is kind of where the rubber meets the road and how you develop that skill. And so that's kind of one aspect of what we're talking about here. That kind of attention and where you focus it is an aspect of kind of this program that I'm going to talk to you about tonight. The other aspect of it, and this is kind of, I'm gonna have to get my notes because it's pretty extensive. So here are kind of some of the cognitive benefits of kind of doing this mental mindfulness meditation style training. So you can reduce, and this is all kind of backed up by science at this point. Reduce stress. Someone just asked, but we can't count our laps. Actually, you can count the laps on the pace clock. So if let's say you're going on, say a 135 interval for 100. If you're on 135 and you start on the top, it takes 12 times to get back to the top. So it's 12 repeats to get back to the top. That's how you help yourself count. You don't need your watch at all. Look, I've done literally millions of miles of swimming, and never had a smartwatch, and kept all the workouts in my head from start to finish, without it being up on a whiteboard, without it being written right in front of me. It's a skill you can develop. It takes a lot of work, but it is definitely a skill you can develop. Yeah, I would agree. Most athletes are smart asses. So
that's
or the
Coach Harold,
smartest
by the
dumbasses.
way.
Oh, okay.
He's playing
There you
devil's advocate here a little bit.
No, I understand.
I'm just trying to make it fun. I'm just trying to make it fun. That's
what it's all about. Look, hey, that's the other thing.
Hey, it's great. I've been saying this for years, and I'm just throwing out some of the most popular answers.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, look, I wrote an article about this probably 6-7 years ago. And it was like they took me to the center of the square and stoned me in triathlon when I put it up. But look, you just keep on putting stuff out there until people hear it enough times and they start to actually think about it. And so here's some of the things that we know that have been proven in science about kind of meditation, mindfulness work. Reduces stress, eases anxiety, improves working memory and mood. Actually, to a lot of the pros that I've worked on with this early on, the biggest thing that they all came back with was their significant other always knew when they were doing this training, because when they were doing it, their relationship was a lot better. When they weren't doing it, it wasn't as good. Boosts creativity, enables sustained attention. So again, we get back to that focus. Reduces feeling of loneliness, aids in quality sleep, increases pain tolerance, slows the age-related cognitive decline. You typically see kind of long-term meditators have brains that look about 10 years younger than kind of their cohort of age group. There's the potential where it can treat some clinical disorders, and then may limit cognitive biases, which actually can really help in training where it helps you determine, hey, should I take a rest day today or should I just push through? Some of the physiological benefits, and these are some of the ones that I noticed early on the soonest. So it supports immune function, improves insulin sensitivity and heart rate variability. So it's been shown to kind of change heart rate variability by as much as 15 points. So it can be fairly significant if you're doing it on a daily basis. Diminishes inflammation, lowers blood pressure, and then has different kinds of cellular aging impact as well. There's also some studies, not as widely done, but shows where you can increase reaction time, increase proprioception, but those are kind of a little bit more obscure kind of meditations that you've got to do that. But yeah, this is kind of the beginning of it. And if you look at ultimately what we're talking about and where the biggest benefit comes through for athletes, or the sexiest benefit comes through for athletes, would be getting into a flow state. And a flow state is a professor out of the University of Chicago, a psychologist, a Hungarian, named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, coined that term. He wrote a paper on it and then a book in the late 70s called Flow. And it was just him studying peak experiences by people. And that there is with some people, there's a profound change in not only kind of mental state, but in physiology and performance, if you can get into one of these flow states. And if you look at all of the research around it, the gateway, not necessarily causing a flow state, but putting you right on the doorstep of it, the gateway to a flow state is through meditation and mindfulness work. And so that's kind of what we'd be doing. It's a 5-week kind of online program. We'll meet just like this once a week for about an hour. And I'll go over a session that we'll go through. I'll send you an audio that you can use during the week to kind of follow up. You'll have access to me during the week if you have any questions while you're doing it. And then we'll get back together the next week and talk about it and do the next session. So, I've been doing this for a few years now, and with the coaches that I have worked with on it, they always notice a difference in their athletes and their performances after they're done with it. So, does anyone have any questions about it?
Yeah, guys, so we haven't actually talked about it yet. What Tim just mentioned is, I wanted him to just talk about the basis of what he does. And I think we should actually go into a couple of details further on what that is. Like some examples, I think would be really beneficial. But after this call, we did this last year, and a number of times through the year, we've had a number of athletes get on what was a 5-week program where they met with Tim on a Zoom call, and he basically taught you the tools and tricks of how to, through this mindfulness and mental program and focus program. And it proved to be very beneficial for a lot of people. I went through it when COVID happened. Tim was offering it pretty much almost every day, Tim. Was that right?
Yeah, we did it every day.
Yeah, we had.
I did it. I was doing it every day, twice a day, because there was a group over in Europe that wanted to do it too. Yeah.
And so I actually did it because there was nothing to do. And so I got on with Tim. Tim was my swim coach at the time. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try this meditation thing. And we would all do it together. And I remember the first time, I think Tim said, hey, we're going to try to meditate at the end of explaining what we're going to do, why we're going to do it. And I remember a minute felt so long. And by the end, we had worked up to 20 minutes, and it didn't feel like it was enough. We'd really progressed it. And I can tell you for myself through this practice, two biggest things that happened right away, which he mentioned already, is my sleep massively improved. I had deeper sleep. I had felt like I had deeper recovery when waking up the next day. And then in order able to perform better in my workouts, focus better with my work. But the other thing, there was the state of calm. You can ask Steve, our relationship drastically improved. So when he was saying things improved at the house, I was like, that's me. Just through this work, which was interesting.
Well, you weren't the only one. So yeah. It was every pro that, and I started out with, there's probably been about the early group of people that went through this. It was mostly pro triathletes that I was working with. And it was probably about 8 of them total.
Yeah.
So, and all of them reported the same thing with their significant other.
Yeah, absolutely. And that definitely carried over. So that work, I did Ironman Florida, which was my last race, funnily enough, 2 years ago. And through the tips that Tim had given us and the tools I'd now prepared. My swim had drastically improved, which was always a weakness of mine. It really improved, not obviously through the training as well, but more so I'd say the mindfulness and took over, as well as just attention during my workouts. It made swimming much more enjoyable, but I was able to translate that into my race day performance at Florida. But Tim, I feel like we want a little bit more. Can you go into like a detail of something that you
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
do? Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, so if you want to, I can kind of go over maybe one of the benefits. So, for instance, I was working with a really good ultra marathon runner. He won the 100-mile trail national championship twice. I crewed for him at Badwater. And he was one of the other ones that was kind of an early adopter to this. And when we were trying to figure everything out, and one of the things was there was a workout that he did. It was before we started to work together. He was like 7 mile was the kind of the meat of the run workout that day. And he kind of held, I think it was 5:45 pace for 7 miles. There was a little bit of warm up and warm down beforehand. And if you look at the heart rate profile, it looks like any heart rate profile of any endurance athlete ever. It starts out low, it gets higher. Average, I think it started out at about 120, average was 144. It peaked at 169. And then after we had been working together, I think for maybe 5 or 6 months, he did another workout that was similar. This one was, the meat of it was like 5 miles at 5:30 pace. So a little bit faster, but a little bit shorter. Starts out about the same, kind of that 120 as he's warming up. But then something really interesting happens. Normally at the point where it's keep on going up, it dropped below 110 and stayed low, to where he averaged, I think the average for that heart rate was 119 and it peaked at 133. And then if you're kind of skeptical of that, oh, maybe the heart rate monitor was malfunctioning. He then did a marathon that he had been training for, and he went 2:32 in the marathon. And heart rate profile, same thing. Starts out kind of that 130, 140, about 5 miles in. It drops below 110. He averaged 119 for a 2:32 marathon. And, he reported that time didn't kind of operate normally. So he doesn't really remember much of the race. There were just flashes when he would come in and come out. And these are all kind of characteristics of getting into a flow state where you're kind of, because one of the things they think is happening is the prefrontal cortex, where time is kind of, your sense of time is kept. One of the ideas is that the brain is this really energy intense organ. So it's 3 to 4% of our body weight, uses 20% of our glucose and 20% of our oxygen. And it's pretty static. I mean, it always is trying to use, it's looking for homeostasis. So it's always trying to keep it about that 20%. So one of the things that they think might be happening is that the prefrontal cortex gets dialed down, and those resources that would normally go there are allocated elsewhere. And that this is how you kind of get into this peak state. So that was one of the aspects that happens. Now, when we're doing this, so the first session is just learning how to meditate, and learning what it is and what it's not. And, at the end of the day, it's a very, very simple process. And I had I had a professor of archaeology once tell me, and I was kind of researching all this. He said, look, humans have probably been meditating since consciousness arose. So it's something that we've been doing for a very, very long time. And is a really, whether you use it for endurance sports or not, is the really, really beneficial, healthy practice to get into and habit to get into. So yeah, the first session is just meditation, learning how to meditate. learning what it is and what it isn't. And ultimately, meditation is just a fancy word for saying focus. What are we focusing on? And how are we trying to deal with distractions as they come up? Because look, that's the natural kind of state of the human condition, is that distractions are going to pop up into your head. And how do you deal with them? And basically get back to focusing. So that would be the short and the long of it.
Yeah. And then you're going to, because I think many of us meditate, but no one knows how to now take that into exercise. And so
yeah, and and here's kind of the other aspect of it, is that there are roughly, I think I was reading earlier today, there's roughly 300 different types of meditation that you can go to. And scientists that are studying it break it into kind of 4 categories that, all have different aspects that can benefit endurance athletes. And when you think of it this way, if we get back to that idea of the primary thing we're training, there isn't an aspect of the brain that doesn't impact your training. There's not one thing that you're doing without the brain. And the one thing that you really want to think about is this. The brain and the body are really, really tightly intertwined. Okay. And if the brain doesn't make an adaptation to the training, neither does the body. So if you're sitting there and you're asking, oh, Natasha just gave me that 4-hour trainer ride, what are those? I got to line up like a whole bunch of Netflix shows that I'm just going to get crushed just to get through that 4-hour trainer ride. You might want to ask yourself, are you making the best possible adaptation to the training? If you're not focused on what you're doing and you're distracted by a show. And one of the things that you find when you start doing kind of regular meditation, regular mindfulness is things that you used as distractions or as ways to kind of cope with the boredom, the monotony of the training, will start to really feel like distractions. I mean, I've got pros that I've worked with that have had to use music, Like she wouldn't give up music even in swim workouts. And she started to get annoyed by the music, where she didn't want music anymore in her workouts. And this is someone she ran collegiately. She's been a pro now for kind of coming on 10 years. And that's how she got through workouts. So, yeah, there's just not an aspect of your training that this doesn't impact at the end of the day.
guys, if anyone has any questions, please type it in the chat at this point. But yeah, I mean, we've touched on it so many times as far as just going into a workout with intention and then being very focused. But now I think to know to another level that if your brain doesn't focus on it, your body's probably not going to take the training as well as it should. And so think of all the sessions that you're doing that you're just not even paying attention to what you're doing and how you can improve that. I know for me, when Tim spoke to me about this, I had watched Breaking Bad like through my preparation for all my Ironman rides. And then I switched that off, and then I just started focusing and being mindful on what my body was doing and the movements and the breathing. And that drastically helped me, be aware of how I was pedaling and how I was creating power and what felt comfortable. And there's just so many things just pertaining to the bike that you can be thinking about to become better, that any little distraction, then you're losing opportunity. So,
and when we're really talking about kind of driving a new neuromuscular improvement, change, skill set, whatever. So we're talking adult learning. The fancy way of saying it is adult neuroplasticity, but it's just adult learning. You need to change that group of neurons for whatever you're doing, for that skill you're trying to improve. You need 2 things. You need focus with a sense of urgency. So I think probably Allison can speak to this from yesterday. That sense of urgency when you're not using your watch anymore in the pool, and you're just going by the pace clock, and you're feeling kind of really pressed because you're trying to learn this new skill that you're not really that great at yet. That feeling is a very specific chemical in your brain getting released called acetylcholine, which marks those neurons involved in that task for change later. The change later happens during two things, either sleep or non-sleep deep rest, like meditation. So when you're getting back to kind of, hey, how do we hold our attention? This is the focus that's changing these skills. There are three things that will hijack your attention. The first one's pretty apparent, a threat. So you have an immediate threat in your area that's going to hijack your attention. The second one is a bad mood. We've all kind of gone into those workouts where we just don't want to do them, or we've had a fight with our significant other, or it's been a bad day at work, or whatever. You're not going to make the best adaptation because it's going to be more difficult to focus. The third one, which is what we deal with as endurance athletes all the time, which is stress. And so if you've ever noticed kind of as those stress levels go up in the workout, it becomes where either you're looking for more and more distractions or you are more and more distracted. And what we want to try to build up is that ability, even as the stress levels rise, that we're still able to retain that focus. We're still able to focus our attention like a spotlight on whatever we want and hold it there for as long as we want. That's what we're trying to build up.
Awesome.
Does that make a little more sense?
Absolutely. That was great.
Okay.
Yeah, I will just on that note challenge everyone. Tomorrow when you go for your swim workout, see if you can pick one thing to focus on and how long your mind stays on that one thing.
Yeah.
I know Tim challenged me to do that. And he said, just pay attention to that at first. And I was shocked that not even for 125 could I actually keep my focus on that one thing. But then over time, you start to identify and start to bring your mind back. And then you could do longer and longer sets, just keeping focus. But it's crazy once you're aware of it, how bad we are at it. So,
well, and that's the one thing, as I've done these courses online for the last few years, it's really amazing how many people, when they first come on, have a real tough time focusing for more than 2 to 3 minutes at a time. But it makes sense when you think about how our lives now are driven a lot by what's on our phone or what's on our iPad or what's on our computer. And, largely we're living kind of in this attention economy now. Something is always trying to hijack our attention, and in these 2 to 3 minute little chunks. And that's what we've trained our brain to do. In these 2 to 3 little minute chunks, we get a little bit of information that gives us a little dopamine hit, and then we're on to the next thing. That's great if you're an advertiser and you're trying to sell ads, but if you're an endurance athlete trying to kind of really develop a new skill, it can get in the way and limit your ability to improve.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. And what's funny is Harold just made a comment there. Everyone who's riding with music outside, now you guys listening, it's so true. You can do that in training, but come race day, your limiter is your mind wandering. I can't tell you how many times I just wasn't paying attention and my power drops, and my effort drops. And then all of a sudden I bring my attention back and I'm back. And you don't have music on race day. And so you really need to be training yourself on race day to hold that attention, because you're slowing down more than you think just based on that. Would you agree?
Well, and if you think about, what you're training. So if, you have all this massive amount of preparation, you've got a massive amount of data that you're looking at on a daily basis in terms of your physiology, and you're paying as an endurance athlete really, really close attention to that. But you don't have any awareness to what you're actually training your brain to be doing. So there's an idea, there was actually a really cool book, a Buddhist monk trained up to run a marathon, and he got into marathon training and running. And then what he tried to do was apply traditional kind of Buddhist techniques to meditative techniques to training for the run as well, the marathon run. And so there's an idea within Buddhism around that for each kind of emotion that you have in your brain, there's another emotion that'll balance it out. And the one thing that, he talked about was that if you are constantly kind of, because you've got to have a lot of motivation, a lot of discipline, a lot of drive, a lot of determination on a daily basis to get up and train for your Ironman. Because a lot of the work is just boring. It's miserable. You're miserable a lot. So you've got to have this goal that's 6 months into the future, and it's something that you really, really want. Okay. So you are constantly on a daily basis, whether you know it or not, training your brain to be thinking 6 months into the future on something that I really, really want, but don't have. So whether you know it or not, that's what you're training your brain to do. So come race day, a lot of times what can happen is you've trained your brain to always be thinking into the future on something that you don't have, but really, really want. So then if one little thing goes wrong on race day, that can derail the whole project. That can derail the past 6 months of training. So one of the things that you can do, we're thinking about that balance in the brain and then bringing that balance to race day, would be that what do you have in your life currently right now that you possess, that you're really, really grateful for? So endurance athletes, you could start off with, your heart and lungs. So something fairly intimate that you can meditate on, that you're really, really grateful for those things because they allow you to do what you're doing, that you're really, really enjoying. It could be your family. It could be your pet. It could be your job. Anything that you're really, really grateful for, where you can elicit that feeling of gratefulness and then try to amplify it in a meditative state every day while you're training, that can help balance you out on race day. So those are just some of the things that you can start to do with this when you become aware of it, when you become aware of how involved the training of your brain is with your body and all of this training.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. It is 6:30. And so I'll end on this. Tim, thank you so much for taking your time to come and talk.
Oh yeah, it was a pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Guys, Tim's going to put together, and we've done it last year, kind of a package of what it looks like if you did want to work with him. We will decide on a day, I think, based on his availability. And then I think it's based on.
I think in the past, we've kind of done it either after this call. So like 7 on a Sunday or 6 or 7 on a Wednesday.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So I'll send it out after with the time link of this call. And if anyone is interested, then they can reach out to Tim and we'll get that going. Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank you again. Really
Hey,
appreciate
thank you.
it.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
All righty. Bye.